Good evening, happy Friday, Miami sports fans. Welcome to a special presentation tonight from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We're going to get you ready for Week 14 of NFL season. A lot of you guys are going into your playoffs this week, unless you're lucky enough to have a bye. So I'm joined tonight by Danny Gillette up here in the top right, and down here in the bottom we've got David Friedman. Talk about sports. You might know him a little bit better. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So a lot to go over. Big weekend coming up, not only for fantasy football, but obviously with teams positioning for the playoff race. So got a lot of injuries to review and give you some last minute news and notes to get you ready for the weekend's action. So want to jump right in here and highlight kind of the latest injury news. So if you look up here, a lot of guys are listed as questionable, which is going to leave you kind of hanging to the last minute. So want to get your thoughts on who you see on this list that might be somebody that you need to handcuff or look at. I'm going to start with you, David. Who do you think you're concerned about here and might want to jump on the waiver wire or something?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the McCaffrey thing. We talked about this off air, but we're kind of veering away there. We know that's a no-go. Gibson, same thing, I think. Gaskin looks like he's going to play, and I know Ahmed is not ready anyway, so that would be a mess. Zeke, I think that's the one that I'm kind of looking at, and I don't know what the way that their season is going so far, and I guess he's not terribly injured. Like he's okay enough for them to be. He's questionable, not doubtful.
He's trending up though. He's been trending up lately. He's been practicing. I think he was maybe a full participant, or he's been working his way back.
You can understand them easing up on him. Is kind of where I'm going with that. Is teams like that, especially if they paid him. The worst thing that could happen at this point in time is he gets hurt. And I know they're in a playoff race technically, but is it worth the risk to continue to pound? And Pollard's look good, man. So
yeah, he's available in a lot of leagues too. Tony Pollard's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. I know he was dropped in one of my sleeper leagues, and he might be somebody to keep an eye on, if not this week, just to stash on your bench if you got enough depth.
I think Crowder there, honestly, that's the other guy I'll go. I think Crowder, I know they're all messed up. It looks like Mims is out too. So, I mean, if Crowder plays, I like the play. But outside of that, you're kind of, I mean, honestly, I couldn't run down their depth chart. Perriman, I think he's been hurt for a while too. So.
Yeah, he's been playing well, actually. And the Houston wide receiver core is a mess. So you got Brandon Cook. He's banged up out there. So I think it was Kiki Kuti had a huge week last week. A lot of people picked him up last minute, and he was able to win some matchups. So going to be interesting to see the late reports on game days for a lot of these guys that are listed as questionable. I'm concerned about Josh Jacobs because if he's out, the drop-off on that team between him and Devontae Booker is pretty massive, and Jalen Richard is not really going to light it up either. So if he's not going to go, if you have the Raiders offense, it might be a David Carr kind of day. Danny Gillette, I know you had a tough one with Cam Newton and the Patriots yesterday. I mean, it really broke my heart to see them struggle mightily last night against the Rams. So my deepest sympathies to your New England Patriots going into the weekend. First of all,
I'm a Dolphins fan, so
yeah,
humble pie once in a while,
it happens to us. But how you doing in your leagues, Danny? And who are you looking to maybe have a breakout game with some of these injuries that are out there?
Honestly, I'm looking for the Houston wide receiving core. If Cooks can go, with Will Fuller out, Deshaun Watson has been throwing the ball a lot better. And the Texans are one of the teams where I think, their record is bad, but they haven't played necessarily bad football over the past couple of weeks. So if Cooks can go, I would definitely see him as one of my sleepers for this week. I believe in one of my leagues, I am in the first round, and one of the guys that has really kind of picked up the slack for me that's not on this list, but somebody who may be worthwhile picking up, especially if you need depth at the running back position, is Damien Harris. He's a guy that kind of slid through the cracks because New England tends to do a running back by committee. So if he is on the waiver wire this week, pick him up. right now Cam Newton can't throw the football for anything, and Harris has been able to show that he can deliver consistent production.
So, I think Sony Michel's in the doghouse a little bit there too, so he's got an opportunity.
He's not very good. I've given up on him, but Harris and also Malcolm Brown, which we kind of talked about.
The Rams, yeah.
I've noticed that he has kind of taken over the starting role over from Darnell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. So he's another guy that I would consider maybe picking up. The running back position has been deep this year, and Malcolm Brown or Cam Akers was on the waiver wire in one of my other leagues. So if he is available,
he blew up. Yeah, talking about that. That was a great pickup this week. And if you don't have
crazy thing, well, I drafted him 60th overall in a 10-team league. And look, I'm not like Matthew Berry here, but I'm pretty good at fantasy. It didn't seem like a crazy pick. The fact that he's on the waiver wire, and I dropped him and picked him back up. So I'm not saying it's crazy, but like that's how the season goes, especially with running backs. And it's like it's almost like a lily pad. You're just jumping from running back to running back, hoping to hit. And going back real quick, David Johnson, COVID IR too. So, they're going to be throwing the ball.
Yeah, well, Duke Johnson, I've dropped him. I picked him up. I've dropped him. He catches a lot of passes out of the backfield, so I actually was glad I hung on to him. He's very valuable in a PPR league. He had 6 catches last week, so he'll do okay in a half-point or 4-point PPR league for you. He's just not going to get you much. He's really touchdown dependent. Same with
defense. It was a low level rushing defense that he picked up a lot of rushing yards too. But even the game before that, I think he had 2 catches, and they were like, "Where's Duke Johnson at?" The whole point of you putting Duke Johnson in there is PPR. He killed me the week before. He didn't kill me, but it's one of those things. I have a Giovanni Bernard lineup in this week that I have McCaffrey in. It's Dallas, so I'll play it. But you better believe my lineup against the Dolphins last week, and he's scaring the shit out of me. But Akers put up 23, so I feel okay. Scared a little bit,
Well, I'm starting Jeffrey Wilson, so this is where I'm at. I've got McCaffrey and I've got Josh Jacobs. I was setting myself up for the stretch run with CMC coming back in week 14 after the bye. He's got this lingering thigh thing. It's just been whoever had the top 2 picks and picked either McCaffrey or Barkley. Really, I did both in the 2 leagues that I'm in, so it's just been an abomination. And I've dropped and picked up Mike Davis, and I'm not letting Mike Davis go for anything. I mean, you couldn't give me anything for him right now because
I got him in the wrong league. So I ended up picking him up in the league I don't have McCaffrey, and in the league I have McCaffrey. It's my big money league that I've been in forever, and there's that anger that you have towards these people.
Yeah. Right.
And I know the guy who picked him up, like he's, we're the most competitive, but I know he was making low offers with Davis in them to other people.
Yeah, sure.
And then when I would send him fair offers, he wanted nothing to do with it. So he got me. Like, I'm in trouble right now, possibly.
Yeah, that's just so interesting. You look at some bad teams in the NFL are really fantasy relevant. You look at a team like maybe Carolina, who's got a lot of weapons in the passing game. You've had DJ Moore breakout. You've got Curtis Samuel, who's, I believe, coming back this week. I think he's been cleared to pay. That could be a big flex play for you this weekend. I really I like the matchup that he's got. I also like, as I mentioned, Jeffrey Wilson from the 49ers. Raheem Mostert's kind of not really been the feature back, and Wilson's been slowly eating up snaps and getting a lot of action in the passing game and also involved in short yardage and around the goal line. And I reached maybe for another player who I was intrigued by because of injuries, and that was Peyton Barber for Washington because of the Antonio Gibson situation. We all know McKissick is a PPR monster. He catches a ton of passes. You look at him, he'll have 6 yards rushing, but he'll put up 15 fantasy points. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. So if you have the Washington backfield, any one of those guys could theoretically put up number. And I took him for short yardage and hopefully goal line situations. He's going to get the bulk of the carries between the 20s. And if he could pop a touchdown on the goal line, that would just be a bonus for him. And I think Mike Davis, obviously, he jumps in that running back 2 conversation with McCaffrey being out.
And the Curtis Samuel thing, real quick, I think what gets lost there is when McCaffrey has been out, and it's one of those things because I have McCaffrey, they've had him running the ball.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So he's lined up in the backfield 3, 4, 5, 6 times a game. They're doing a lot with him. So these numbers that you're seeing from him, they look funny, and you look at it and it's like, oh no, McCaffrey, but it's because they're using him. And in fantasy, the more ways that you get these guys the ball in their hands, man, you just can't, you can't find that anywhere else sometimes. So
Right.
it's like it's what Cordell Patterson should be, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And you're seeing a few of those guys kind of fill that role. And I want to ask you, Danny, what do you think about Taysom Hill? Drew Brees is still questionable and is not likely out, but Taysom Hill's been a real pleasant surprise for fantasy football owners that had the foresight to pick him up. What do you think about Taysom Hill and what's going on in New Orleans? Because also Mike Thomas, I think, is questionable in this game. So imagine if Drew Brees plays and you got Taysom Hill in as a quarterback, and then he's eligible as a wide receiver. You just never know with this season. Things like that have just been crazy. And week to week, you've got these unusual situations. So what are you looking at from New Orleans? And give us some other maybe surprising players that might not be on people's radars.
First of all, I was not one of the people who had the foresight to pick Taysom Hill, and now I deeply regret it. I think with Hill, he has the ability to be like a gadget type of player. He can run the ball well. He can pass okay. He's not the best passer, but his dual threat ability makes him very good for fantasy. If he's available, I would certainly pick him up. The New Orleans offense, with Breeze out, has tended to run the ball a bit more and has had success with it. And I would definitely consider Hill as another option, if not to use this week, then to stash, because I truly think he can provide great value for the Saints. Definitely moving forward. And one of my guys that I was just looking at in terms of running backs is Ty Johnson from the Jets. Frank Gore got hurt on Sunday, and that gave an opportunity for Johnson to really show what he could do. And he carried the ball for 104 yards and a touchdown, and he also caught 2 passes for 13 yards. So he had that PPR value with those 2 passes, albeit not a ton of catches. But those 104 yards and that touchdown certainly took care of things in the running game for fantasy players who had them. And if you don't have them, I would suggest maybe picking them up, because the running game seems to be the only thing that's kind of holding the Jets right now.
Yeah, exactly. Taka, who do you like in the running back group this week as far as sleepers or waiver wire ads? Somebody you could maybe pick up last minute to get you the win in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of tack on to what he's saying. I'm going to go the other way with it, though, and because of my situation with McCaffrey, and I didn't know if I wanted to play Cam Akers against that defense, and his shoulder was hurting. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I wanted to pick up Ty Johnson. And then I thought about the fact of, do I want my playoffs and my season to end fantasy-wise with an Adam Gase running back? Do I trust Adam Gase to win me a week? What am I doing here, right? So like I talk myself out of it. And Frank Gore, he's in. I think he was a full participant today or yesterday, whatever the case is. So I think he's going to play. I like the play until I talk myself out of it.
Yeah,
but I'm
I
with
think people rushed on him. They saw him. I know Sleeper. People play on every different format: Yahoo, ESPN, CBS, whatever you're playing on, app-wise or online. I use Sleeper in one of my leagues, and it has a feature of trending players based on other activity throughout the app, etc. And Ty Johnson was top of the trending list, along with Peyton Barber and some other of those guys that were nowhere all of a sudden. And you're just hoping that they're going to produce. But like you said, trusting an Adam Gase running back is a different situation than maybe trusting a Peyton Barber, who Gibson and obviously McKissick have both produced in that Washington backfield. You can at least see some kind of reasonable floor for Peyton Barber, whereas Ty Johnson, you're banking on 20 carries in one game for 100 yards, and you're kind of pushing your chips in all on that.
It's a risky play.
it's a
I
very
can't
high
do it
risk.
based on Adam Gase. Like that's where and then I got the tacos. I could do the whole, but like I can't play an Adam Gase running back in week 14.
I feel like
that's where I landed, and it's not because I like I said I have Giovanni Bernard, and I'm talking myself more into that based on the matchup, but I'm not excited about that. But like I said, it just was one of those things that I had the opportunity. I saw everything everyone else saw. He had 20-something touches. It's everything you want. He had the volume. And then I realized I'm banking my playoffs on Adam Gase.
Yeah. So where would you go if you needed a running back to get you a win on the waiver wire? Where would you go?
I mean, right now, man, like I said, I mean, I don't think Gio's on the waiver wire necessarily, but if he is, because I had just dropped him a week before. I think it's a good matchup. And yeah, of course, you saw Baltimore run all over them. And their defense is, whether they're decimated injury-wise or mentally because of what's been going on, like, you can just have at them. So I like that matchup. He's a PPR guy. Like, that's why I trust him. So if Gio's out there, I say it again, go get Gio. Put him in, they could sit Mixon the rest of the year. You might have a guy, the matchups aren't great if you need someone to throw in the rest of the year, so.
I don't think Mixon's coming back, honestly. It just feels like he's kind of going to shut it down. Why? Joe Burrow's done for the year. What have they got left? They're not going to make the playoffs. I think at this point you probably shut it down. He's still pretty young. He started off very slow. He started his stride there in the middle of the season, and what happened was a lot of running backs is they're kind of fading late down the stretch, and you're sort of scrambling to fill in guys. And you got guys coming off of injury, and it's like you're getting a running back one infused back in your team, like the David Montgomery situations. And these guys have been out for a while. All of a sudden,
if Burrow was still there, I understand putting your top running back in there, to protect Burrow and to continue that progress. But when you have no Burrow in there, it's a lost season. Yeah, the guy, look, Mixon led the AFC in rushing 2 years ago. It's not like we're talking about some scrub. I'm just saying, like you're saying, it doesn't make sense. I think ultimately,
protect your assets for the future.
You have Burrow coming back next year, man. You want Mixon, like that's what you want.
And a better line, hopefully, for Cincinnati. But
yeah, the offensive line's a real issue there. And you look at this list real quick. Julio Jones being out, obviously, that opens it up for Calvin Ridley, who's really been productive this year, and maybe somebody like a Russell Gage, or if he's in the lineup, Hayden Hurst. There's a few weapons for Matt Ryan down there in Atlanta, but the running back situation is kind of a mess with the Atlanta backfield. It's kind of interesting. The Todd Gurley situation, he was starting off to really play well, and then the situation, he's been out a little bit. He's been coming back, but being phased back in.
He became Todd Gurley again.
Yeah, exactly. 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So there's a lot of uncertainty for many fantasy football players out there going into week one of the playoffs. It took a lot of managerial chops to just make it this far for a lot of teams in a lot of leagues. You had to really get lucky with injuries and your top running backs, keeping guys healthy. Kamara has been carrying a lot of teams. Aaron Jones, even when he's been banged up, he's still been mostly healthy and productive there. He had one little stretch a couple weeks. I think he missed maybe 2 weeks, Aaron Jones, and he's been very productive and solid. Green Bay's offense is just ridiculous. I think Devontae Adams is in that top wide receiver of the NFL conversation. If not, he's right there. He's top three, I think. What do you think? Is that just talking out of my ass there, or is there something to that?
I've been on the Devontae Adams train. So my best friend, going back to like when Devontae Adams was a rookie, he used to drop passes nonstop, right? That was his thing. He couldn't catch a ball. That's kind of important in football. So yeah, he was against him, and for years I'm like, he's got it. Like I saw something that was there, and I just kept feeling. So we have this ongoing joke about Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers helps. I'm not going to act like that isn't part of it, but this guy, you see when he gets the ball, and he could get the ball at the 10-yard line, and you just have, it's almost like what Demaryius Thomas used to do. It's a weird thing, and I compare these two guys, even though their game is a little different. But obviously they both, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, and Demaryius Thomas would get the ball in space and go like that. That's, he can do other things, but that's what I think of. Just get him the ball and let him go.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see Aaron Rodgers and that offense just keep clicking because he had a down year last year. I think he took it personally, and we know Aaron Rodgers is pretty cerebral and a little salty. So he's put his best foot forward this year, and thankfully you're getting some elite quarterback play to carry you through into the postseason with Green Bay because their defense has been a little bit up and down. And on that, I want to switch a little bit to the defenses because they are an important part of fantasy football. Of course, you might not think it, but you look at a team like the Miami Dolphins, obviously. Our team down here is putting up a lot of points on both sides of the ball, and defense and special teams is crucial. So I have a waiver wire ad for defense that I'm looking at, and I've actually picked them up this week, and that's the Carolina Panthers. I think they're going to really have a good showing this week. They let me see who I think they are projected for around 8-9 points versus Denver. Denver's quarterback situation with Drew Lock is not that great. Their running backs have been up and down, and he's got some weapons in the passing game. But Carolina's defense has really played well. And going back to their game log, last week they recovered 2 fumbles for touchdowns, and they put up 20 points against Minnesota on defense. So that was a good streaming play last week, and I think with the matchup at home with Denver, I think it's another solid play for Carolina in Week 14. After that, you might want to put them on the shelf because they have in Week 15, they travel to Lambeau Field to play the aforementioned Green Bay Packers at Lambeau. So what are the defenses you guys are looking at? I'll start with you, Danny. Any defenses you might want to stream for this week?
I'm looking at Green Bay's defense against Detroit. Green Bay, they are aggressive. They try to get to the quarterback, and they play hard. And it sounds cliche, but it's something that they have been doing all season. You take a look at Detroit's offense, and there isn't too much in the way of the running game. There are a lot more weapons in terms of the pass, but it just seems like too often Matt Stafford tends to trip over his own feet and get in his own way. So I like Green Bay this week, and I kind of just wanted to piggyback off of what you said about Carolina. One of the reasons I would pick the Panthers this week is because of Brian Burns. The Panthers, when they drafted Burns, were looking at Burns like a Julius Peppers replacement. I'm not saying he is going to be the next Julius Peppers, but Burns has really come on and kind of helped mold the identity of the defense following the retirements of guys like Kuechly and other players on that side of the football. So my 2 this week would be Carolina and Green Bay, I would have to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, that's funny because I benched Green Bay's defense for Carolina this week. So it's interesting that you went that way. I'm excited to see how that one might turn out. David, who are you looking at on defense to maybe stream for Week 14?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with probably the most obvious one, but I'm going with Seattle just because I have a Steelers defense in both of my leagues. I'm in 3 money leagues. I'm in the playoffs in 2 of them, but both teams I have the Steelers defense going against the Bills this week. So I picked up Seattle's defense to sort of block, I was playing defense a little bit against my opponent, but how could you not like that matchup against the Jets? Speaking of Adam Gase, right? Yeah, but that's the obvious one to me. I think the other one really would be the Chargers. I mean, because Julio Jones is out, right? So it kind of has a ripple effect as far as Calvin Ridley. To me, I'm playing against him. I love that Julio Jones is out. I feel like his numbers are way better when Julio's out there. It takes everything down a little bit for Matt Ryan. He doesn't have Julio out there. The running game, if it's Gurley or whoever it is, I mean, they're on the road. They're not in the dome. There's a lot of things that I like about that matchup for the Chargers. I think they're getting some guys back too. So
Tennessee is a really good matchup too with Jacksonville. That's another defense that you could maybe look at. I don't think they're a real turnover-heavy defense, but they picked off a lot of passes early in the season, and they've kind of slowed down. But they got lit up by Cleveland for 41 points, so it might be a buy low opportunity and a bounce-back game. They've got Jacksonville and then Detroit for their next 2 matchups. So it might be a plug-and-play for 1 to 2 weeks, even with the Titans.
What do you think about the Giants? Because everyone's on the Giants' defense this week against Kyler Murray, and I get it. I know they're good. it's just one of those. It doesn't sound right, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
In my opinion.
Yeah, they get a lot of sacks and they've been forcing turnovers, but I think that's a risky play against Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins in that offense. Kenyon Drake, I believe we have him as questionable as well. So it'd be interesting to see if maybe Chase Edwards gets a run in that game. He's got a lot of weapons in the passing game. We saw what they could do against the Dolphins with guys like Christian Kirk over the top. So that could be a tough play for Washington as well. I think I'm sorry, Washington. The Giants play Arizona. My apologies. So it could be interesting to see. I really wouldn't bet against Kyler Murray on a week-to-week basis. I think he's going to come back and probably right the ship against the Giants, who are playing very well under Joe Judge. The Giants kind of remind me of last year's Dolphins a little bit. They're playing real hard, very competitive. They're scuffling a lot on offense, dealing with a lot of injuries and some bad luck. But they're playing hard and they're peaking later in the season. I think that's a team on the upswing in the NFC East, which is a real crap show division, if you will. I think the worst division overall in football, to be honest with you. So the Giants are sitting pretty well. Daniel Jones has shown flashes, and he's trending upwards to playing this weekend as well. So I think a lot of the Daniel Jones hate was maybe a little bit premature. I'm not going to say he's the next Eli Manning there in New York, but he does have a very high ceiling, I think, if he can clean up his mistakes and mechanics and stuff like that. You get Saquon Barkley. A team like the Giants really has to fix the interior of the offensive line to give him some help, and he needs weapons. He doesn't have the true dynamic outside threats. I mean, Slayton and Shepard are good receivers. They're slightly above average, but neither one of them is a true wide receiver one. And Evan Ingram's a pretty good tight end. But again, I think he really needs a marquee weapon in the draft, similar to the Dolphins.
They had a wide receiver one, and they sent him off to Cleveland.
Well, listen, it is what it is. You got to obviously balance the personalities with everything else, with the talent, and usually talent trumps all. But that was a more dysfunctional situation. I think now the Giants are a little bit more of a stable organization overall, and I think players coming to that situation will be a little bit better prepared too. With the
you look back at it in hindsight, right, and all of the stuff, all the negativity around Odell, and it's like, all right, well, let's compare to a guy like Antonio Brown, and I'm not going to sit here and get into all the Antonio Brown stuff, but it looks like nothing compared to Antonio Brown. So what, Odell, like, you know, he's maybe a little bit childish and he wants to win a little too much, and when he doesn't win, he doesn't get his way and he's kicking the side. You know, in hindsight, I think that trade was bad for everyone, honestly. I think
Cleveland's been good. I mean, he was playing,
but not because of him.
Cleveland's been good because of the run game.
Yeah, they've been better without Odell.
Yeah, the defense has been solid with Cleveland too. They got a lot of weapons on the defensive line to get after the quarterback. They're a pretty good team overall. Baker Mayfield, I don't see him as a franchise quarterback personally. I think he's too turnover prone and a little bit of a gunslinger, which I like a gunslinger, obviously, but I think you got to have somebody who's a little bit steadier hand back there who's not going to give you the 4 interception game. I'll take somebody who leans a little bit more towards the game manager role within the Cleveland team, because you have a good enough team around you. Like you said, Danny, with the running game, I think they have the best 1-2 punch with Chubb and Hunt. You've seen Hunt's production kind of go down since Chubb came back, which is interesting. I sold high on Kareem Hunt actually and traded him at the deadline for Josh Jacobs, which obviously with him, I thought that was a good trade at the time.
It's a good trade. I don't care what you say. It's a good trade. Look, Kareem Hunt, first of all, you know Chubb is coming back and he's going to – but I think even more so because Kareem Hunt carried the load while Chubb was out. Wouldn't you think if that's a playoff team, it's almost like, all right, like take a break, take a little bit of backseat. I'll let you take some pounding and bounce it out a little bit so that then when it gets to the playoffs, they're equally injured or not injured, healthy, whatever you want to call it, you know. So I don't know. I think that's kind of what's happened. I think, you know, because it doesn't make sense. I'm with you guys. Kareem Hunt to me was a guy to go get, but I think they just decided like you carried the load for X amount of weeks, so like take it easy.
And I drafted him very high too in the league where I took McCaffrey. I had the number 1 overall pick, obviously, and it came over to my turn. I grabbed him, I think, in like round 4, round 5, somewhere way down the pike there. And it was a good pickup. He carried my backfield early in the season when McCaffrey was out for the first time because Hunt was going off there for a long time in the PPR and half PPR. He was really a running back one or in that conversation. He was putting up numbers on a week-to-week basis. So if you have a running back one and you've made it this far in the season, my hat's off to you because it was a challenge this year, I think, for a lot of managers out there and a lot of guys playing, novice players, players that have been playing for a long time. Regardless of the situation, you couldn't have predicted a lot of the guys going down. You just look at this list here for week 14. I just picked out a lot of the marquee names. I mean, this list could have been a hell of a lot longer, to be honest with you. And I did leave off Chris Carson. That was an omission on my part. I apologize for that.
I think
Seattle backfield. I think he's going to be good, so I wasn't too concerned about that. But any parting shots, guys, before we get off of here?
I think Michael Thomas, I think he practiced in full. Like going through the list, I think Swift looks like he's going to play, but what do you don't feel comfortable doing anything there. Gaskin again going to play. I mean, look, it's week 14, man. You gotta. It's survival of the fittest at this point. It's I was joking around on Wednesday night. I was hustling to set my lineup, and I realized when I went to go put Thursday Night Football on that it was Wednesday night. But I was super psyched for the playoffs to start, and I needed to set my lineup, so I was a day early. But get your lineup set, man. Like make sure because of where we're at, injury wise, that you're looking at like Zeke things, and you never know what's going to happen last minute. That if you need that running back, someone might become available, and you might be the first person to see it. So
turn those Schefter notifications on for sure.
Yep.
Rap sheet and Schefter if you feel like it. Yeah. So Danny, any parting shots before you jump off here?
3 things real quick. First thing, like David said, and like you said, both Davids actually. Check your notifications because things change by the hour, especially with COVID testing. You never know. Secondly, one more defensive play I like this week is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings barely beat the Jaguars last week, and they have been inconsistent throughout the entire season, and they really haven't been that good. So I would definitely consider taking the Buccaneers defense for their pass rush, not their secondary, but if their pass rush can get there, then hopefully the secondary won't have to do much. And then finally, Rashad Higgins, ever since Odell went down, he's kind of filled in a role of a playmaking receiver. He's had some bust games, but he's had a lot of boom games. Last weekend, he caught 5 passes for 95 yards and a touchdown, I believe. So if you're looking for a late wide receiver ad, he could be your guy because right now he's kind of starting to get into a groove for Cleveland.
Yeah, and also I had another sneaky one too was Michael Gallup. He was somebody I picked up this week and stashed on my bench. Just because the Dallas offense is not that great, guys are still out there making plays in certain situations. And his target,
they got to throw the ball.
Yeah, they've got to throw the ball. They're not going to win a lot of games from the lead. They're going to have to come back a lot of teams, but they're at Cincinnati. So Michael Gallup is an intriguing play. He gets a high snap count. He plays 80, 90% of the snaps. Last weekend against Baltimore, tough defense, he put up 18 fantasy points, 11 targets, 7 catches for 86 yards with a touchdown. So he's trending up, and he's got a good matchup. I think late in the season, matchups matter. If you have 2 guys that project pretty close to the same amount of points, I would lean towards the matchups. You got to look at who they're playing. I think that's going to be the separator that might be the difference, a couple points here and there to get you that win. But want to thank Dan.
Real quick, I just want to throw this out there as a homer shot too, but this is reality. Like I threw in a Cam Akers, but I thought about playing Lindbound Jr. Like I don't know what to expect from this guy, but the little bit that I saw last week, I wanted to play him. So I think that's a sneaky pick in terms of he's going to get some receptions. If Gaskin's the only healthy running back, he's going to be doing stuff, and it's the Curtis Samuel thing. So we'll end it on a Dolphins note. I wanted to throw that out there. That's my long shot.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki, he's got a good matchup, I think, as well with Kansas City. I think that could be a high-scoring game for the Dolphins and Chiefs. So I really can't wait to see that matchup, and a lot of good games this weekend. So follow the network for more coverage of the Dolphins and NFL. Make sure to hit up our Dolphins team at 3 yards per carry. And, of course, follow us at 5 Reasons Sports. Want to thank Danny Gillette and David Friedman for jumping on and joining us today. And thank everybody for watching.